or I can move back home and just resign that position. And we made the decision to move our whole family based on that question. So we moved our family to Cincinnati, and it was supposed to be a 2-year move, and it was heartbreaking, heart-wrenching. But I mean, she and I have talked about it. She's told that story to her friends, and it's fun when you can tell people that your 6-year-old daughter probably saved your life. It was a wonderful but sad and happy moment. It's hard to describe when something like that happens. We teach in our leadership training that all feedback's relevant, no matter who it comes from, and that's the story. You know, because I could have easily sloughed that off and said, she'll never remember, she won't know.
Yeah, she's a little kid.
The 2 kids are younger than her. They won't remember I'm gone all the time. I could have done all that.
Thriving in Tandem. It's a podcast for you, the married entrepreneur that wants to win in business and marriage at the same time.
Welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
Hey, Thriving in Tandem family. Welcome back to this week's episode.
Hi, you guys.
And we got a great one today. As always, we only get great guests. One, because we only want to hear from people we want to hear from.
Mm-hmm.
So we really don't take everybody. I mean, because we get pitched all the time, and I'm like, man, if that's not a fit. I mean, sometimes it's interesting when we get these pitches. I don't know, Ford, because you got a podcast. I don't know if you get these pitches, but they make it sound like they listen to your podcast and butter you up and and then they say, oh, I think my guest would be, or I would be a good fit, and it's like, no, you have not listened to the podcast, because that's clearly not a fit. We get some really random stuff. I'm like, really? I'm like, if you're going to pretend, at least make it good, right? But we got Ford Taylor, great entrepreneur, business leader, now consultant. But here's a quick snapshot, because I can't read his entire CV, because then we'd be here for a whole another episode. But here's a quick snapshot of Ford. In 1982, him and his wife, Sandra, purchased a struggling 2-employee screen printing shop, and transformed it into a powerhouse. Through acquisitions and growth, Ford eventually became CEO of Brazos Sportswear, a 2,000-employee, $300 million leader in screen printing and embroidery. His business impact earned him recognition as Texas Small Business Person of the Year and a top 10 finalist nationally. And in 1988, after decades of building and leading high-growth companies, he pivoted towards leadership consulting, first as a senior VP at Great American Insurance, then an ordained minister, committed to helping leaders remove constraints and build healthier cultures. And so currently he's the founder of FSH Consulting Group and Transformational Leadership Training Organization. And that's just a quick snapshot.
Is there anything he hasn't done?
Do you have a ranch, Ford?
Actually, we do own part of a ranch down in South It's my wife's family, but we have a bunch of acres contiguous to the ranch that we also own. So yes, we do.
Awesome. Okay. Well, honey, when we do our next cross-country trip, we're going to have to stop by at Ford's ranch, because Kay Lee grew up riding horses. So Ford, welcome to this week's episode.
Thank you, Robert and Kay Lee. It's always fun being with you. And I've loved our time together on the U.S. Christian Chamber Board, and the wisdom that you bring and that y'all bring, even last year at the event. And I'm sure the same will happen again this year. So
Thank you. I remember the first time I met you in person, you were giving away your books at the Christian Chamber event, the expo, and they were all gone. You sold out. And I walked up to you and I introduced myself and I said, oh, Ford, you're all out of books at your table. Is there any way I can get another one or get one? And you had one in your backpack and you gave it to me, and it's this book right here. So thank you.
But we're going to dig into that a little bit. But first, or do you want to know how famous you are? So Kay Lee's, she tries to get us on podcasts. She's my booking agent, basically, get us on podcasts, and then a lot of times trying to look for guests too for ours. And so she put in a prompt in ChatGPT, basically looking for guests that are good connectors. She put down, I want them to be good at connecting with other people at a heart and relationship level. Click enter. 3 names come up. The first person on that list is Ford Taylor, Chairman, U.S. Christian Chamber of Commerce. The note is deep trust builder, high-level relationships, generous connector.
Thanks, Robert.
So do you don't thank me? Those chat.
I'm like, honey, you got to see this. Come and read
was
it.
This last week?
Yeah.
This was last week. So we already know we're going to be interviewing you. And she goes, honey, look at this. And I'm like, wow.
Thank you, Lord. This is exactly what I wanted.
I knew Ford was a big deal, but man, geez. So, hey, that's the way to kick off this interview. And so, obviously you're a great leader. We've got a great book, but I really believe, after looking through your bio, that I think the thing that probably honed your leadership skill was when you and Sandra, you weren't even married yet, became the campus favorites by teaching disco and country western dance to thousands of students, a 16-year run that revealed an early gift for equipping people with confidence and connection. So please do tell about that experience.
So I loved to dance. In high school, my best friend, I had three best friends, and one of them was the best dancer by far in the school. He was like Michael Jackson kind of talent. And so I got to go to parties that very few white people went to. So, but anyway, but my point is he helped teach me to dance, and we were best friends. And so I went to college. I had always done freestyle, but I had never done couples dancing. And at Texas A&M, country and western is a big thing, country and western dance. And so when I was a sophomore, I asked a girl to go country and western dancing, and we were out there, and we didn't have any idea what we were doing. I mean, we were so bad that another couple came up and said, "Could we help you?" I mean, we literally, I mean, we were laughing more than we were dancing. So they showed us how to do it, and I went, "Oh, this is easy." And so we started dancing. And then when I was a senior, I was doing a lot of country and western, but disco came out. And so I took up disco dancing, and I started doing competitive disco, traveling. Yeah, I've got
like John Travolta?
Yeah, I like it. So, like in my disco outfit with my white suit, red shirt, and Kruger Rand, I'm like 6'7" because the hills are so high. But so I
Can
took
you wear that in April at the expo, please?
No, I'm going to ask Crystal if he could give us dance lessons at the expo.
Oh, there we go. That's the event we're going to do.
Yeah, I'm going to see. I'm going to talk to Crystal about that later.
You know, but we could do that. I mean, literally, we could do a dance class at the expo.
Oh,
okay, you heard
okay.
it. I'm going to get this video to Crystal, and she's on the. She is on the call. She heard it.
It's good because dancing is great for couples. It's leading, it's following, it's getting in a rhythm. So, you know, you can actually use dance to teach marriage. But anyway, so I got a call from Texas A&M University when I was a senior asking me if I would teach disco to what they had their after hours program. And I told them, look, I'm working 30 hours a week at a sporting goods store. I'm going to school full time. What do you pay? And they told me, I said, I don't have time. I said, the guy that normally gets second place at all the contests, I'm pretty sure they're locally. I mean, we traveled and did it, but he's really good. He'd probably love to have this. And they said, well, what would you do it for? And I said, well, if you'll double that, I'll consider it. And they said, we can't, our bylaws won't let us. The next day they called me back. They called a meeting the night before and said, we rewrote our bylaws. We'll pay you that. And so when I graduated from college, you know, Sandra helped me teach the very first class that I ever taught because I just met her like a month earlier, and you know, one dance with her and I was hooked. But and she'd never done it before, so she literally was helping me teach disco, and she'd never done it. But anyway, so you know, when I graduated from A&M, took a job there in town because she was a freshman when I was a senior, just to hold my career until she finished. We actually were making approximately 3.5 times more teaching dance class a couple nights a week than I was in my full-time manager. So it was very good to us financially, and it had a lot of good leadership aspects to it also.
So you learned the art of negotiation at a young age because you weren't afraid to ask for what you thought you were worth.
Well, I probably would have said yes if I wasn't already working 30 hours a week and going to school full time. In other words, it was like, okay, there's got to be something that's worth adding more on to what I was already doing because I loved college, everything except school. I was having a great time in college, so I didn't want to add more work. But it wasn't work, it was fun. And then when disco started dying out, you know, John Travolta, you know, they took on country. You know, the country and western took over. So we just converted from disco over to country. And so we taught both for a while, and then swing came around. So whatever came around over that 16-year period, we just kind of stepped in and taught it.
Well, that's great. Well, see, for those of you that are on a live call with this, the things you didn't know about Ford. And so, you know, obviously you've had a very storied career professionally and also even relationally. You have a great marriage, kids, one grandson. But I know there was a period where it wasn't all roses. And so I want to read kind of a little excerpt from your book because this one struck out early. It's early on. I think it might be chapter 1, but this is when you did a lot of traveling for business. And one evening you came home on a Friday evening, whatever, it was kind of relatively late, but your 6-year-old daughter basically wants to spend time with you. And so instead of you're trying to put her to bed, but then she's asking for ice cream, and then you feel a little guilty because you've been gone so much that you go, let's go have some ice cream. So here it says, after a few minutes of me eating my ice cream and my daughter swirling hers around in her bowl, she asked me with her little voice, "Daddy, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure, sweetie. You can ask me a question anytime you want." She said, "Daddy, you know that thing that you're doing in Cincinnati? Yes. Did you offer to do that or did somebody ask you to do it? He looked at her and said, well, somebody asked me to. She never looked up. She kept swirling her ice cream. After a few seconds, she said, Daddy, do you think you could get them to ask somebody else? And so here you are, busy business leader, all that. And
Successful.
and this, I mean, when I read this, I was like, we don't have kids, but I was like, oh gosh, I don't know how I deal with that. But Ford, like what's going through your head? Obviously, this is seemed like a pivotal moment because it made the book. So talk to us about that.
Well, I think I'm trying to find that spoon. I carry it with me still. She's 36 years old in April,
Mm.
and she was 6 when she asked, and I still carry that spoon with me, so
Oh,
that's
wow.
the yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've ever physically swallowed an apple or an orange, but that's what
Oh,
I physically felt like I was doing at the moment. You know, I was leaning back, tears were pouring down my face. How do I answer that? You know, how do you answer a 6-year-old girl that laid awake in your bed till midnight, laid awake till you got home so she could ask that question? And I knew the easy answer is it probably saved my life. You know, I was during a time at that point of holding a gun in my hand. I had a suicide letter, but I literally just looked at her and said, well, you know, if daddy weren't helping those people, a lot of people wouldn't have jobs. And she said, then that's okay, daddy. But the rest of the story, because I just didn't know how to answer her. But the next day, Sandra and I talked, and we said, you know, we got a couple of choices. I can resign from being this CEO of this public, because now we were a public company. I can either resign from that, because I was commuting, you know, 50 weeks a year from Texas to Ohio. I said, so I can either quit, okay, we can move our family to Cincinnati, you know, and move the corporate office, um, or I can move back home and just resign that position. And we made the decision to move our whole family based on that question. So we moved our family to Cincinnati, and it was supposed to be a 2-year move, and um, it ended up. Well, we still have our home there, so that'll tell you. So it was heartbreaking, heart wrenching. But I mean, she and I have talked about it. She's told that story to her friends, and you know, it's fun when you can tell people that your 6-year-old daughter probably saved your life.
yeah.
Well,
Now,
and then she stayed up till midnight to ask you that question, you know what I mean, and spend time with you. It's like
yeah.
the kids are just so pure and innocent and, she was just wanting more time with you.
Mm. Yeah, it was a wonderful but, sad and happy moment. It's hard to describe when something like that happens. You know, we teach in our leadership training that all feedback's relevant no matter who it comes from, and that's the story, you know, because I could have easily sloughed that off and said, "She'll never remember, you know, she won't know."
Yeah,
You know,
she's a little
she's
kid.
6, the 2 kids are younger than her, they won't remember I'm gone all the time. I could have done all that,
Yeah,
but we chose a different route, thank goodness.
that's good. Yeah, that's a message, every, just busy achiever. I mean, you don't have to be a business leader, but just there's people that always just want to achieve, just want to keep working or do whatever. People in ministry. My dad was a pastor, but just you're just going, and you don't hear those warning signs, right? Because I think even you wrote in the book, like if Sandra would have asked you that similar question,
Mhm.
you probably would have had a different answer.
I wouldn't have hit her, but But I was very, very passive aggressive, okay? Very angry, very insecure. You know, I cheated on her for a long time, you know, and I was in the middle of that when my daughter asked me the question. But yeah, had Sandra asked it, the response probably would have been something more very passive aggressive.
Mhm.
You're the one that wants this 5,400 square foot house. You're the one, you know, I would have just said all this. You're the one that wants to drive a nice car. You're the one that I don't care about these things. You want this, you want that. And you expect me to be able to do that working a normal 40-hour week job? That would have been something like would have come out of my
Sure,
mouth at that.
sure.
She asked it. Very inappropriate. It would have been a very inappropriate answer.
And that's a common answer from most guys. Like I'm providing. Basically, that's the excuse, right? Obviously, that was a pivotal moment. You made that change, but as far as moving forward, how have you been able to still build companies now, consulting with companies and all that, and you're still pretty busy, but clearly, your priorities are straight. Your faith, your family's first, and all that. But how do you do that? Because that's the $1 million question that we're all trying to figure out. How do you do that? Like, what do you know?
Six
Yeah, how do you successfully do both?
Maybe a little story of how I got here might help, because you don't want to do this. You don't want to arrive on what I'm about to share. You don't want to arrive on that answer the way I got to that answer. There's no reason to have to go through that. Um, But, I was suicidal. I was cheating, and the move was only supposed to be 2 years, and I went to our board at the end of the first year and said, "I'm ready to step down as CEO. I'm gonna take on the number 2 position. We're gonna move our family back to Texas." They had a board meeting without me and said, "If you don't wanna be CEO, here's your parachute clause." And my self-identity was tied up in that business.
Mhm.
Okay. I was not, Sandra will tell you, I've never been driven by money. I was driven by insecurity. I was driven by, I'm never going to be good enough. And what can I do to prove that I'm good enough? It wasn't about the money for me personally. I mean, she'll tell you that. She said that's one of the reasons she fell in love with me, that I treat janitors and presidents of countries the same. He's never cared about money. He does that for us. But the insecurity was my issue. And when I teach now people today that if you'll show me the most arrogant person in the room, I'll show you the most insecure. If you'll show me the most judgmental person in the room, I'll show you the one with the biggest secret. Okay. And so that was me. I had the big secret. And then after that, I did go to work, started a consulting company, but then a couple of years later, I shared with Sandra what I had done. And I knew she was going to leave me. I had zero question in my mind, and I'll never forget. And if you're listening to this podcast and you've been through something like that, or whether it's sex, alcohol, drugs, I mean, whatever it is that you may end up as your bottom, whatever that is, there's no reason to end up in the bottom. You can make the change before, and that's what we try to do now. I teach people how not to have to go through that, for the pain to stay the same, exceeds the pain to change before you do it. But I'll never forget when I said to her, "I know you're going to leave me. I expect you to. This is 100% my fault. You didn't deserve it. You didn't do anything to cause it. This is all on me. All I ask is that you don't take the kids away from me." And I said, "So I know you're going to leave me. I know you don't love me." And she responded, "Why would I leave you? I love you more than anything. I forgive you. We'll get through this." And I broke like a baby. And I remember being in church my whole life. And that day in June of 2002, I felt like I had just looked Jesus in the eye. It doesn't matter what you've done. I love you. I forgive you. We'll get through this. And so as we were getting through it, there's some commitments that I made. And just so you'll know, I also stopped travel for almost 10 years completely. And when my youngest daughter was a senior, I was actually coaching her varsity volleyball team, and I wasn't traveling. But before her senior year, she came to me and said, "Dad, I've heard you on the phone, and I know people are begging you to come, and you're telling them no, that you're not going to travel again until I get out of high school." And she goes, "I'm going to be okay. If you need to say yes to some things, I know you're going to be here for volleyball season. You would never miss that. If you need to say yes, okay." So it was actually her and Sandra who launched me back into traveling again.
Wow.
But I made the decision back when I shared all those things with Sandra. One of the things I did is I gave her 10 questions. I said, "If you ever suspect me of doing something like this, ask these questions. And if I answer anything but yes or no, question it.
Mm.
Keep diving, keep digging." And then I made a commitment that I will never take another travel engagement, speaking engagement, consulting engagement, ever, anything like that again after work hours if we're home, or travel away without us talking about it first. And so that's the commitment I made. She does not require that anymore because the trust has been rebuilt, but I've stuck with it now for 23 years. So, I mean, every time when I'm asked to travel, I'll say, "Pencil it in, I'll get back to you." Every time a consulting client or a coaching client calls and says, "Will you take us on as a client?" Pencil it in, I'll get back to you. And so the trust that was built and the security of making that commitment, and guess how many times she has said no in that 23 years?
0?
Yeah, I'd say 0.
One time.
One time.
And it's when I was dealing with chronic Lyme disease. And there were times I was in the fetal position. There were times I couldn't write my own name. Okay. And I was asked to go, and I was still doing everything I could to do what I do, because I kept saying, "I'm going to die of something. If this is it, I'm going to die doing what God's called me to do." And I was asked to go to Western Nigeria. And in Western Nigeria, a lot of Christians who do the kind of work I do, they get martyred. I mean, they get killed. And she asked me to say no to that. She goes, "I'm afraid if you get into a fetal position there and you get in trouble, you won't be able to get out." So that's the only time in all these years that she's ever said, "If you want to go, go, but I'm asking you not to." So I just picked up the phone and said, "Can't do it. Find somebody else."
Yeah. Amy on the call asked if we can get those 10 questions. Yeah.
I
please.
have a good question too.
Go ahead.
So the conversation with your daughter when she was in high school on the volleyball team, is that the same 6-year-old with the ice cream? Is that the same daughter? Okay.
No, the ice cream was the oldest daughter. This daughter's 5 years younger. So she was the youngest daughter.
Those 10 questions basically essentially kind of create some guardrails. So you have to agree, right? Both of you are in agreement on how you basically do business in a sense. And I think that's important, not obviously important for you back then for rebuild trust, but I think it's just important for couples in general because we need those guardrails. Otherwise, we're just like, we're just going to say yes to everything, right? We have in business, we tend to have FOMO, fear of missing out. Like we're going to miss out on that big opportunity. And I remember Kay Lee, right before we launched the business, she was asking me, like, she saw me that there would be opportunities to travel. And so she asked me, how much do you want to travel? And of course, I never thought about that. And like our pastor travels a lot. And so that's kind of, I think, the reference. Yeah. And I'm like, so I never thought about that. And so I'm thinking, I'm like, I just basically came down. I told her, 1 week out of every month, cumulative 1 week out of every month, I'll travel. The rest of those 3 weeks, essentially, I'd be home. So that was the commitment I made up front. That was the initial boundary, right? And I've been able to hold to that. But it was interesting. If she never asked that question, I would probably just say yes to everything and the schedule would be all crazy, right? And so it's interesting being able to say no, know what to say no and yes to is huge because now the yeses are true opportunities and the no's are just things I really have to assess. And they look like opportunities, but they were really more distractions. And so I think those 10 questions, yeah, I agree. We'd like to get those 10 questions.
Yeah, and I asked that question because I wanted to know what the expectations were because I thought, oh my gosh, I hope he's not going to be gone all the time. I mean, we love to travel. I like hanging out with him.
Well, that's good news.
I get to stay at the board now.
One of the hardest things about, one of the things I teach is marriage is hard, divorce is hard, choose your hard. But once a husband and wife really learn, what God says in the Word about love and respect, and they really do learn to love the wife and respect the husband, what I've discovered is that when a wife feels 100% secure, 100% secure that her man is going to be there rocking the great grandkids on the back porch because they can't rock the Casbah anymore. I mean, once they know for sure, okay, that they're going to be there at the end, it's amazing how easy communication gets around travel and around because that security is there. They know that they're loved unconditionally. And when a husband knows that he's respected unconditionally, that the wife respects what he does, the call on his life, it's amazing how good marriage can get. Very, very few people find that place. And so when Sandra's mom fell and broke her hip, they thought at one point she had about 6 months to live. And so Sandra came to me and she said, would you do me a favor? And I said, what is it? She said, would you say yes more to the travel? And I said, okay. And I said, why? She goes, I would like to really focus on my mom for these next 6 months. I'd like to go down and see her at least 2 weeks a month and spend 2 weeks with her. And I said, if that's really what you want, I said, but I'm happy. How about I go with you one of those? And she said, I really want to focus on her. I don't want to focus on you that week. And I said, okay. So she's the one at that time. Well, that went on for 4 years.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
She did it for 4 years. And then at the end of that, I asked her, because of her love languages, am I serving you by working like this? Gifts and acts of service, And so, when I do consult, I make quite a bit of money. And so I'm saying, is it serving you? Do you feel loved when I'm saying yes to these things? Because I don't say yes without you. She goes, I actually feel loved by you working like this. And see, so me traveling as much as I do now, it's actually making her feel more loved. In that way, when we are together, we're very, very focused, but we God and family for sure, but that just makes the rest of it so much easier. It makes the work so much easier.
So, and that all just came from clarity, right?
Mhm.
Like the open communication and getting clarity. Otherwise, a lot of how couples get into these binds is just a lot of assumptions and we're just going and then we get these arguments and conflict and all that. But what you're sharing is just open communication, getting clarity. And there's seasons in life where, hey, I need to be home. And maybe it's okay to travel. And then it's funny how Sandra's the one that gives you the okay, go travel or get out of the house.
That particular season was about her mom.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Another season, it might be about our kids, like, our oldest daughter's about to have their second child, and they want Sandra there for 2 or 3 weeks, of course, right after. And she's going, okay, go fill up your calendar for that 3 weeks, so I don't want to have to worry about you. She doesn't mean that mean. She's just saying, I want to focus on
Yeah.
them. And so being able for her to be able to say that, you ready, and you not get your feelings hurt.
Mhm.
So a man don't get your feelings hurt. And for her to feel like, yeah, I'll go work more. So you can do that. And matter of fact, I might just work in Dallas, and that way, if y'all need me to pick up your meals or something, I can serve you at the same time, but I can stay someplace else. But it's that open communication. And it's interesting that you said what you said, Robert, because it's so important. We teach this tool called a VP MOSA, where we try to get individuals to write their own tombstone, write their own eulogy, and then write their values they want to live by. And then the vision, what they're going to accomplish, the purpose, why, and what we call mission. What are you willing to do that others aren't willing to do to accomplish that? And then we just call that the mission. And then we say, write down some clear objectives, to move you towards that vision. So we just call that VP MOSA. But you said something, Robert, that most people don't go deep into, even if they take the time to do something like that. So we teach them how to do it. And we ask them to break their lives into 4 quadrants. So just to draw a quadrant and write family in one quadrant, work or income producing in another one, health in another one, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, and community in the 4th quadrant. And then when you're writing your objectives, write them around keeping those 4 quadrants in balance, not equal, not 25, 25, 25, because there are times when you're younger and you've got little kids, your community time probably needs to be less. You probably, unless you're coaching your kids, which I did, unless you're teaching Sunday school, which my wife did. In other words, unless you're engaging in free time that also is with your family. But there are times that family has to take the priority. There are other times that if your relationships are good and you're in agreement, that work might take the priority. There are other times that your health, we talked about what I've already done this morning, around health issues. And so I encourage couples to do that.
Mhm.
Imagine that you're riding down the road and you both got killed in an accident at the same time, and you're going to be buried on top of each other. What would you want that tombstone to say about your marriage? Write the eulogy. What do you want your kids to say about your marriage? What do you want the people in your neighborhood, what the people you work with, your customers? I mean, write down, if you were going to attend your funeral, what would you want them to say about your marriage? And what values would your marriage have to live out? Now, what's the vision for your marriage? And so the clarity, that's just one way of getting that clarity, Robert, because if they do have those 4 quadrants in balance, I call it the life-work balance, not work-life, because we got that all screwed up. But when life-work balance is right, there's just a place of peace. And when you start getting out of that place of peace, you know that one of those 4 quadrants is probably out of balance.
Yeah. No, that's a good word. We have a similar 4 quadrants, very, very similar to that. And yeah, it's true. You got to be able to write down, being very, very intentional
Mhm.
about doing that, right? Otherwise we just react. And so I can't believe it, but our time's up. 30 minutes. Let's just flew by. So, and that's a great way to end it, but just want to give you one last word for what's the last Lars, because all of you we talked about family and all that, but clearly it doesn't slow you down from being able to earn or achieve from a professional standpoint, right? Can you just give us one last word around that encouragement about prioritizing family and not feeling like you're going to be left behind?
Again, that eulogy, for example, I said way back when I did that, which is now 25 years ago, I put in there that there will never be an important event in my children's life that I won't be available. I will never travel. They would say this about me. There was never an event that I wanted my dad there that he wasn't there. That Sandra would say, no wife was loved more than I was. Now, when I wrote these things down, there's not a chance I thought that would ever happen, because this is before I even confessed to her what I'd done. Okay. But when you write the intentionality of those things down and you make those decisions in advance, when that call comes and they say, hey, I'll give you $100,000 to come do 3 days at this event. Well, when is it? Sorry, my kid's got something going on. I can't make it. I mean, you don't even have to pray about it. You don't have to think about it. You've already prayed about it. You've already put it down. So be intentional. That would be number 1. Number 2, communicate, communicate, communicate. And I guess last, and I'd say this to anybody, but when you accomplish this in a marriage, our problem is we never argued. See, we were on the other end of the spectrum. We just kept things below. But one of the biggest pieces of counsel I could give to a couple. Learn to give up your need to be right without losing your passion for truth. And when you do that, you can have good, hard, I'll say complicated, but simple conversations because the energy's not in it. You're really trying to get to the right answer. So that would just be 2 or 3 things. I already shared about the love and respect thing. So
No, that's great. Ford, thank you for coming on with us. And we're going to go to the live audience here in a second, but thank you so much for your wisdom and your experience and just sharing your story and just being vulnerable with that. I mean, it's huge, huge impact. So for those you're still listening, so I know this has impacted you. So please share this with another married entrepreneur who needs to hear this. So they don't have the regrets that so many do. And so until next week, God bless you and go thrive in tandem. Thank you for listening to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. Please visit our website, marriedentrepreneur.co, for a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business succeed.
And feel free to leave us a review and share this episode with another married entrepreneur. That would mean so much to us.
See you next week.